So now I welcome Dr. S. Ram Manohar Pari.
Yes, sir. I am here waiting.
So your session is over to you, sir. You can present your paper now.
Okay, sir. Shall I present the screen? Share the screen, sir?
Okay, sir, you can.
Yes, sir. Is my shared screen visible, sir?
Yes, sir, it's visible, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Good afternoon to everyone. I am Dr. S. Ramanagar Pari, Assistant Professor in English, KG College of Arts and Science, Coimbatore. In this conference, I am going to present my paper titled The Impact of Gandhi's Principles in Kantapura. These are topics. I divided my paper in these points: introduction, Gandhi's principles, national and discourse, caste system in Kantapura, the follower of Gandhi, fasting, Congress in Kantapura, symbols in Kantapura, Swaraj, public sale, violence at Before Mount, conclusion. This novel, Kantapura, has been written by Raja Rao in the year 1938. The Kantapura name is the utopian village in uh, Karnataka state. In this Kantapura village, the people how the illiterate people have participated in Gandhi's movement, how who is motivated behind these village people. We know the Gandhian principles: truth, ahimsa, non-violence, satyagraha, and Swaraj. These are the principles of Mahatma Gandhi. Initially, these Kantapura people don't know this Gandhian ideology, Gandhian movement. It is a debate among all over this nation. National discourse. Caste system in Kandapura. We know that caste system before independence we have followed that Varna system. In that Varna system, the people were uh, followed the different way of lifestyle. In this novel, Kantapura is the protagonist of this novel. He is an highly educated person, only person in that village, Kantapura. He is the follower of Mahatma Gandhi. His family members thought he will become the sub collector or the government officials, but he didn't fulfill the desires of their parents. But instead of that one, he followed the Gandhian principles. He makes the village people to be educated. All the people in that village, Kantapura, all are illiterated people, but he makes them to be educated. He educating in every day evening. He went to these people house and teach them reading and writing and how to speak. Then he implemented this Gandhian principles to these people, Gandhi's ideology, everything he is teaching those people, they accepted that one. Then finally, then another thing he highlights: fasting. Fasting is a part of satyagraha. We can protest against the person in the non-violent way, in the satyagraha way, that is good for everyone. He is highlighting. Then for fight against this British administration, definitely we have to follow. We have to start a Congress party, Gandhian movement in this village, and he visits everybody's house in Kantapura village and asking them to join this Kantapura party, Congress party. And he said, "What is the basic eligibility to become the member of that party?" Per year they have to pay 4 annas to the party, they can become the member of Congress party. Another way is every day they have to yarn. Here in this last point, 4 annas per year, or they have to be 2000 yards of yarn per year, because avoiding the foreign cloth, they have to use khadi dresses. So he introduced this system. The Congress movement has introduced this system using khadi. They have to yarn 2000 yards per yards of yarn per year. They will distribute all over this India, and they will the people will get the amount for this production of this khadi cloth. These people comes to know the importance of this Gandhian movement. Then they started the Congress party in that Kantapura village, and they formed the committee. Murthy is the president of that Congress party, and the remaining people are the treasurer and members. In one lady down from downtrodden lady Rachana, she is also one of that Congress party in Kantapura village. After started this Kantapura party, they asked they are very interested uh, for the Congress movement activities. Then they received the message from the higher officials for salt satyagraha protest. These people, because the British administration has introduced the tax for salt. For Murthy's opinion is everybody can prepare the salt. Uh, it is an easy one. Why the government has introduced this tax for the salt, and particularly the poor people cannot pay the tax. They are highly unaffordable to pay these taxes, so he won't interested to support the British administration's this tax for salt. Then symbols in Kantapura, here Mahatma Gandhi is the symbol of Lord Ram, good spirit. White people government is the symbol of demon. For keep away this British administration, evil, Raja Rao author has symbolized this term. Gandhi is very very needed, very very important uh, for India's independence. So he everybody have to join on the path of Mahatma Gandhi to fight against the British administration. That's an evil spirit. Then they conducted the salt satyagraha. At the same time, author has mentioned Gandhi has marching towards the Dandi march for against salt satyagraha protest. The same incident takes place in the same date. Then Murthy has been arrested, and Karwar Congress Party Secretary Shankar has uh, searching the good lawyer for releasing this Murthy, our hero. Then after the release, Murthy says we have to form the Swaraj, own rule, which means we have to govern ourselves. We should not follow the British administration's rules and regulations. At the same time, we have to against the British administration in the non-violence way, satyagraha way. We have to protest against British administration for India's political freedom, and we should avoid using toddy shops were everywhere in Kantapura village and the province of Kara. I request the people of Karwa, province of Kara, all villages in Kara, Kantapura, Santapura, and Skeffington estate in front of the toddy shops were there. You have to avoid using this toddy. So the revenue will not go to British revenue department. Because of this result, there is 24 shops have come in the condition to be closed because nobody is going to toddy shop for using toddy. So because of this one, government looks at this village Kantapura. Then they announce the public sale for this village Kantapura. There is an auction conducted. The rich people from Mumbai, uh, they come to this village by car, luxurious car. The people of Kantapura would astonished why these people are coming. What is it? Is any important? Then finally, the village has been sold to these rich people uh, from Mumbai. Then police personals and police officials have arrived there. They compelled this. They compelled this village people to leave this village. Those who are not paying tax and those who are rebelling against the British administration are not permitted to live in this village. This village has been already sold to the another people. So police officials compelled these village people to leave this village. When these people fight against those police officials and army people, why should we leave this place? My father, grandfather, ancestors were lived in this place. Then why should we have to leave? And when they marching towards this Bebur Mount, where Skeffington Coffee Estate is there, that is administered by the for white people. They are asking the employees in that Skeffington Coffee Estate to fight against for Gandhi's to support Gandhi's movement, fight against for British administration. In this place, there is a harsh quarrel between the village people and the police personnel, and finally that becomes a violence when the police personnel started firing to these people and few people were died. Finally what happens means the village of the people of Kantapura village people left their native place. Then the people from other parts of India, they occupied this village. Particularly this Kantapura is the symbol of India. In that same time, who are the people not paying taxes to the British administration and fighting against the British administration? They are asking political freedom. They are excommunicated because they won't allow the people to live in this India. So the village Kantapura is the symbol of India. Then finally what happens, the Murthy also arrested in this place. He released from the prison and he says his complete experiences to Achaka is the narrator of this novel. And some rich people were in Kantapura, Patel, Range Gowda, Batta, money lender. These rich people have sold their properties and left Kantapura. They settled at Mysore, Bangalore, and some other parts in India. The natives of village people, Kantapura, are not in Kantapura, they left that place. Now the people are from other parts, the old houses are become rotten. In this novel, Rajarao portrayed the condition of India during 1930s. Uh, at, at the same time, he projected Gandhi's truth, treating untouchables are also the human beings, how the people have united and fought for India's political freedom from British administration is wonderfully revealed in this novel, Kantapura. My conclusion point is finally, one more freedom fight is needed to protect our nation from corruption. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It was
Yes,
so
sir.
nice to listen to you and to hear. Yeah, is
Yes,
it a
sir.
little bit of noise there? Mute of your. Yeah. So it was so nice to listen to you, especially those pieces in your paper. But
Yes, sir.
may I ask you some questions because in me. I saw that you have been talking about Gandhian principles or the impact of Gandhian principles on the novel,
Ye-
particularly
Yes, sir.
novel. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you know, you earlier when you started the paper, you were talking about the Gandhian principles of peace, love, satya, and dharma, and everything.
Yes, sir.
You find these particular principles of especially been employed influences of these principles in particular incident in the novel or anywhere in the novel, especially? Did you find
Yeah,
any?
yes, sir. One more novel. So that is R.K. Narayan's Waiting for the Mahatma. In that Waiting for the Mahatma, Sri Ram is the central character of that novel. He doesn't have any. He's an uneducated person.
No, no.
Uh,
I was asking you any other incident. You have mentioned one in particular, but probably may I? I think I have missed if you have been talking about that. The
yes, sir.
principles of non-violence and the principles of righteousness. So, did you see those principles in particularly in this novel, in this particular Kantapura?
Yes, sir. I have noticed, sir.
So did you mention it about in your paper?
Yes, sir. I have mentioned in this paper, sir.
Okay. So
Uh,
may I know any instance you mention any particular incidents in this paper?
yes, sir. When the Murthy has been arrested by when the Murthy has been arrested by the police,
Okay.
when people of Kantapura and block this police personals, don't arrest Murthy. When the police attacks these village people, when Murthy said, uh, uh, people of Kantapura don't fight against the police officials. They are not our enemies. Our aim is we are against only the British administration, not the government employees of British government. So stop beating. stop fighting against these government officials. Gandhi says, no beating, sister, no beatings in the name of Mahatma. In the page number
Principle
65, sir.
principle of non-violence here,
Yes,
and
sir.
this has been
The
mentioned many times.
yes, on the page number 60.
I just wanted to know that you have mentioned these principles, or I have been listening to it. Maybe it's okay. Very nicely. Thank you. Now
Yes,
I
sir.
would like to welcome the next speaker. She's probably Radhika, Miss
Yes,
Radhika,
sir.
scholar from the University of Harvard. So we are welcome the next participant here to please come and present the paper.
Thank you, sir.
Now I welcome Ms. Radhika Inklani to present her paper.
Sir, it's Radhika Ingalagi.
Sorry.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Radhika Ingalgi from Karnataka University, Dharwad. My title of the paper is White Collar Crime in America with a special reference to Sarah Paraski's Indemnity only. I begin my paper with a brief introduction of detective fiction. Detective fiction can be traced back to the 1800s around the time of Industrial Revolution. On the one hand, technology was developed, and in the other hand, productions, transportations, and farming was increasing. People started to move to cities. Society started to change from smaller villages to big cities. In this process of urbanization, this became a reason for a rise in crime. As response to this, police forces was established. In London, the first police force was established in the year 1829, and Special Crime Investigation Department was established in the year 1842. By 1880s, the Criminal Investigation Department became an important factor in fighting against a crime. Even in America, we can see the same pattern, though it was a bit later. So that's the beginning of a crime fiction. It started to grow in a real world as well as real world, and also started to have an influence on fictions. The first modern detective story was The Murder in Rue Morgue, written by Edgar Allan Poe, a short story published in 1841 that introduced the world to a private detective Auguste Dupin. In fact, detective fiction was so new when Dupin entered the literary world, and that the word detective hadn't even been used in English before. The first detective novel followed soon after with the British author Vicky Collins' The Moonstone, which was published in the year 1860.
Madam Radhika ji, your voice is too low here. Maybe your mic is not supporting. So could you see check out the issue because the voice is not being properly audible here.
So you
Please.
can know. Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Yeah, yeah, it's clear now. Please.
Is it audible, sir?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Uh, The first detective novel followed soon after with the British author Vicky Collins' The Moonstone, which was published in the year 1868 and is normally celebrated as the first great detective novel of the world. The detective character who really shaped the way that we see literary detective today are like Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot. Though Poe may be regarded as the father of this genre, but Arthur Conan Doyle was the one who truly cemented this genre by writing fictions rather than short stories. The pioneer of detective fiction writers have created a legacy of detective novel based on gathering clues and solving crimes. But in contemporary literature, this style was evolved into what is now called a cozy mysteries. In response to this, some American writers began to examine and recognize the formula for detective fiction. Many people started to think that classical jigsaw puzzle solving crime fiction is too unrealistic and theoretical. These authors and their readers were looking for a crime novels that were more based on reality and the way crime happens in day-to-day life. Thus, hard-boiled detective genre was born. These stories include the detective that were dealing with corrupt cops and organized crime. Hard-boiled crime novels created a world wherein it's every man and detective can trust no one. While hard-boiled detective fiction emerged in the year 1920s, the detective genre really took off in America in the year 1930s to 50. One of the most popular hard-boiled detective novels from this period is Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep. It insists the detective maleness. But in 1980, there was a literary revolution by female writers. like Suvi Grafton, Marcia Muller, and Sarah Paratsky. They started a revolution by featuring female eye in the scene of detective fiction. This was influenced by many writers and led us today where we are. Sarah Paratsky is a New York Times best-selling author. Paratsky is the recipient of a prestigious award, Grandmaster Award from the Mystery Writers of America and Cartier Diamond Dagger Award from the Crime Writers Association of Great Britain. The significance of Paratsky as a crime fiction expert will be concentrated upon in this paper. It deals with the aspects of investigation, mystery, murder, suspense, puzzle, crime, detection, and thriller, etc. Paratsky's success of the fit for starting a revolution and in the process captured readers' imagination around the world with the great private detective called V.I. Warshawski. The female private eye entered the crime scene in the mid-90s. While stereotypical notion of a class tend to imagine greater criminal activity usually take place in poorer or urban areas, whereas Sarah Paratsky depicts her fictions with the picture of upper classes, particularly in big businesses and Chicagoland suburbia. Her central focus is on a crime committed by a person, respectability, and high social status, which can be stated as a white collar crime. The major motto of this paper is to explain white collar crime in her novel Indemnity Only. As a prominent crime writer, Sarah Paratsky raised her voice through her novel in a time when crime novels by and about women were rarely recognized and appreciated in a top publication. The term white collar crime has been associated with the upper class and the people who are possessing a high social status. The concept is related to the people who are recognized by their power and wealth. The term white collar crime was first introduced by the sociologist Edwin Sutherland in the year 1949. Conventionally, white collar crime is non-violent in nature, but which sounds dangerous and difficult to control. History of white collar crime in America is so profound. There are some characteristics of white collar crimes and particular importance are the offender has legitimate access to the target or a victim of the crime on the basis of a occupational position. The second is the offender is spectacularly separated from the victim and the offender actions have a superficial appreciation of a legitimity. Common example of a white collar crime includes financial fraud, security fraud, insider trading, bank fraud, healthcare fraud, anti-trust violations, government fraud, etc. Sarah Paratsky has the significant crime and mystery novel Indemnity Only was published in the year 1982. The story begins with the meeting an anonymous client who says he is the prominent banker John Tired, but he turns up someone who takes up to the crime scene. The present paper discusses the various characters of the white collar crime along with its proofs in the novel Indemnity Only. The first victim was Peter Tyre, who was student at the University of Chicago. He was about to become a union organizer, was slumped over the kitchen table in his apartment. V.I. Warshawski, a private detective, is employed who calls himself a John Tyre to find his son's girlfriend Anita Hill. The first and foremost clue Vic found in Tyre's apartment was boys' pay stubs. Ajah Insurance had its national headquarters. So in the beginning of the novel itself, Patsy gives a hint about white collar crime story. In fact, Vic is the short name or a nickname of V.I. Warshawski, who is a private detective. She says herself that she usually only deal with a white collar crime. After finding the Peter's body, which was in the early stage of decomposition, Warshawski was being beaten and her apartment and office dismantled by Earl Samison, who was one of the leader in bank, in an effort to get her off by the case. But when she again made a visit to Peter's apartment, it took her surprise because she'd been there before. It was just a typical disorder of a student apartment, but now Vic thinks that the same hands that had been to her place had done a similar job even in Peter's apartment, and she believes that definitely they were missing something and they had been Peter's apartment first, if only after that they had gone to Warshawski's apartment, and she also believes that the missing thing could be a piece of a paper or evidence of the fraud. After a lot of a search, Vic found a piece of a paper in Peter's apartment, which stuck by a grease to the bottom of a store. It was carbon inches square. Copy about the little inch square. The top left corner had the Ajaxa logo in it and it read draft only, not negotiable. He could take this bank and had it testified at which point Ajaxa would pay the sum of $250 to the bank as a worker compensate, which is indemnity payment. The story takes an unexpected turn when real John Tyre is killed, which turns Vic onto slams and link between the Knife Grinder Labor Union and Ajaxa Insurance Company and the Fort Deadburn Trust. When Varsavsky meets Anita, Anita is the girlfriend of the Peter Tyre. Anita reveals that her real name Anita is not Anita Hill, Anita Magriw, and she had a reason for running after Peter's murder. That bet it case much bigger than murder. Peter was working for Master as a favor to his dad. It was his job in the debate department. He worked for a budget director there to check the record for clients' draft against clients' files and to see whether there were a match. They have 300,000 workers compensate claims every year, but only for a spot check. He started with some big ones. One day he found a claim set up for a Carol Mallory, a total disability, lost his right arm and been crippled by the freak accident. Carol is one of the senior vice president of the bank, but the fact is he has never been in an accident. And then he looked up the other guy on the locative border and they all had indemnity claims. Even Peter's father was killed only because of this involvement in those claims. Anita's stories inform that Master had a killed Peter Tyre. Master is the one who is close friend of the vice president of the bank and John Tyre, but there was no proof which could make police officers to handcuff a senior vice president of influential Chicago banks. In attempt to figuring out who murdered Peter and why Peter shot, Vic Varsavsky figured that he knew about a potential damage to very powerful and very corrupt leader of the bank. So Varsavsky asked Jill, who was the sister of Paretsky, to find anything among her father's paper. And when Jill found a document that had both Mr. Masters and Mr. McGrew name in it. It is a Xerox and John Peter wrote the date on the top, March 18, 1974, which says Agreement of a Trust. The undersigned Yardley's Land and Master Andrew McCann are hereby granted federacy responsibility for any all nominees submitted in the account under their authorities for the following, which had list of all those nearly 21 or 23 names. Then it added any other name at their directions under the John counter signature. This document meant was Master could set up fake claims for anyone and then he can cash draft those amount. Which is insurance fraud, and this was first discovered by Peter. Ajaxa Insurance Company at the Fort Dust. It is all because of indemnity payment into the dummy amount. Thus, Sarah Paratsky debut work indemnity only has a white collar crime element in it. Thank you.
Nice to listen to your paper. And earlier I was just knowing about her name, but I haven't read any novel of Tara Paratsky. And this is really very interesting to know about this particular
Yes, sir.
thing you have taken. So may I know that what particular thing which inspired you or motivated you to write particularly on the white crime fiction and to see this particular angle? Is there any particular reason for that?
Yes, sir. From the beginning, I am very bookish. Sir. From the beginnings, I like detective genres.
Okay.
I like the way Sarah Paratsky writes. She always concentrated on the maleness. Even though her character is a woman, she concentrated on the maleness of that woman.
Okay. So you could have chosen that particular man or woman particular this angle of
It's a white collar
woman, but you chose white collar
crime.
fiction or white collar crime fiction scene. So is there any particular reason for this theme only on the white collar scene?
No, sir. It is. It shows the maleness. Women can do anything. Women can solve everything. So in this way, how I got interest in Sarah Paratsky's work.
Nice to listen to you. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank
May I, Mr. Vineet, could you please welcome, invite the next
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
participant, please?
So the next presenter would be Rao Rahib Khan. So I welcome him to present his paper. I think he's not here, I guess.
So, okay, so I think we should invite the next one.
Okay. So the next presenter would be Sanyog Sethi. Sanyog Sethi, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
So you can present your paper now, sir.
Yes, thank you, sir. A very good afternoon to all of you. The topic of my presentation is periphery struggle. Sorry, am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. The topic of my presentation is periphery struggle and violence, a study of Neil Mukherjee's novel, A State of Freedom. So in this paper, basically this paper tries to look at the issues that results out of migration that is voluntary and forced in some circumstances. The people from rural India migrate to metropolitan cities for the amelioration of life. And they are forced to live like, sorry for the disturbance. Yes. The migrants, they are forced to live like untouchables, are clearly separated from the upper class society. And these people from rural India, they find it hard to make their lives better in a city totally deprived of the things they crave for, and are constantly reminded of their being as outsiders and harassed mentally and physically. They live in marginal settlements and squatter areas with very limited health services. The lives of these people are like nothing, and in their everyday life, they undergo severe tortures and exploitation. So, this novel I have chosen for study, A State of Freedom, is filled with heartbreaking incidents which reflect that the perpetrator sees the victim as completely other, worthless of deserving even the very basic kindness, and describe the past lives of marginalized in the metropolitan cities. Neil Mukherjee also asserts in one of his interviews that his main purpose in writing this novel is to represent truthfully and unblinkingly what lives economic migrants within India have. And he does not his intention is not much to talk about the contrast between the haves and have-nots. So if I throw some light upon my writer Neil Mukherjee, as other or marginalized. He was born in Calcutta in 1970 and completed his graduation from Jadavpur University in Calcutta and moved to England. He spent some years studying at Oxford and Cambridge University, from where he graduated again. After his formal education, he foraged into creative writing. He was published in 2014, and his debut novel, Past Continuous, or also known as A Life Apart, it won India's Chief Award of in 2008. And the novel I have chosen for this study, A State of Freedom, it was published in 2017 and is not only famous in India. So this novel presents characters from all the classes of society, and it depicts the loss, chaos, confusion, and indifference that exists between natives and migrants. This novel is structured as a 5 interconnected stories that brilliantly present this focus on the issues of migration and displacement, and that further results into urban-rural cultural conflicts, ideological conflicts, hunger, poverty, domestic violence, and struggle for better life, etc. And the cultures and ideologies of the different socioeconomic strata based upon their occupation, income, wealth, and social status, it creates clashes among the classes. And the support for Naxalite violence by the later generations is also one of the major themes of this novel. And this novel is Whenever people migrate to a new place, they are likely to confront some problems like physical violence, labor exploitation, abuse, discrimination, and social exclusion. Host culture consider it as a possibility of raising their standard by means of exploiting the migrants. And gradually, there is a rapid proliferation and inequalities between people from two or more places. So this novel provides enough examples of these inequalities that a migrant suffers in his or her life. For example, one of the characters in the novel, she comes to Bombay for work. The family where this character Millie she used to work did not allow her to step out of the building. She was confined to live within the four walls of the house. So Millie, who first time in her life came to Bombay, definitely had some liking for the outside world of metropolitan city, but remaining in the house all the time, she felt like a caged bird who had an increasing impatience to venture out. Mom was going home to attend the funeral ceremony that she might be finding some excuses to escape from here. She was completely heartbroken and frustrated by this time and started planning the different ways of running from here. Millie's exploitation and her social exclusion led her to think of her freedom life, freedom of village life that has been completely snatched from her. Neil Mukherjee in this novel has also depicted how the human beings they target, torture, and mistreat animals to achieve their desired aims. In one of all the five stories of this novel, they are Lakshman. He finds a bear cub in his village and he decides to raise him. His intention behind raising the bear cub is to make him learn some specific steps of dancing so that he can earn money by showing people a dancing bear. He uses cruel means such as sleep deprivation, hits Raju with unstoppable energy, with infinite and perpetual motion. The stick becoming the engine that drives his hand, the soul animating his body, bringing itself down like a malignant rainfall on the flanks, back, mouth, muzzle, face, legs, head of the animal, where it can land and strike, and Raju squeals and whimpers and growls and shrieks. So the modern is at the core of this story. There are many days and nights when Lakshman and his bear cub they do not get even one time meal. And talking about the violence that migrants they confront is also the main part of this novel. And the concept of violence it has very serious overtones. It includes causing a physical or emotional harm to any living creature intentionally. It can be in the form of physical force, sexual perpetuating the domination of ruling classes over the lower classes. Ruling classes throughout centuries, they have maintained their power with direct or indirect violent means and have been continually exploiting the weaker section of violence is tried to leave their native place. And Neil Mukherjee in his novels is very skilled at writing about violence against children, violence against women, violence against animals, and gay men also. Heartbroken by the extreme poverty and unable to arrange food for his family, the Lakshman often mercilessly slaps his wife Geeta out of frustration and bitterness. He also considers it shameful that when his wife Geeta she goes out of her house for working. She also considers it shameful when his wife Geeta she receives some eggs given by her malkin at her working place. Finding this, Lakshman savagely smashes the eggs on her face and warns her to kill her. In the same way, the character Millie I earlier talked about, In the same way, the character of Millie and her family witnessed the brutal incident in early years when some 5 to 6 people come in their hut and take Budhwa, the Millie's brother, outside and mercilessly chop off one of his hands. Such brutal incidents of violence make her family think of sending their other children away from this violent environment. This shows how the concept of violence it even works as a push factor. In another incident, there is another character, a very poor Adivasi girl named Soni. One day she noticed a lump in her mother's stomach. She ran to the hospital and told her mother that she was pregnant. But the miserable financial conditions of family did not allow them to go for it.
Is it a problem from my end that I'm not being able to listen to Mr. Sanyog, or somebody else is also not listening?
So, yes, sir. It's some network issue, sir.
Second. Yeah, please.
Mm,
Can continue. We can continue, sir.
Okay, sir. Sir, should I change my network? I'm connecting to Wi-Fi. Should I on my mobile network? It will take a minute.
Yes, you can change, sir.
Just give me a minute, please.
Mr. Vineet, may I know that one participant was left? Probably the one participant was present. So,
Yes, Rav Rahib Khan was in presence, sir.
right now, is he now or not? Is he
I,
here or not?
Sir, I may leave the meeting for seconds if I change my network.
No problem. Please take your time.
Okay, I just
Meanwhile, I would like to know, from Mr. Vineet,
no,
if
sir. He's not here, sir. Rav Rahib Khan is not here.
not here. So I think one more participant is left. Only one participant is left. Huh?
Yes, sir. Shweta Morris here, sir.
Okay, so she's probably here.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
No problem.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
okay.
Okay, thank you. So I was talking about the character of Sony, that when financial conditions of their home do not allow them to hospitalize her mother, and finally her mother did suicide by hanging herself from a tree. So this section darkly stresses on how the lives of poor people are forever away from the basic amenities and the protection of the government. The servants from lower classes, when migrate to metropolitan cities for earning money, they live a life of complete marginality. They're made to consider themselves aliens who have no right to mingle with high society, though they work in their houses. Despite of being sympathetic and generous treatment towards servants, the necessity of maintaining a safe distance from the servants has often been highlighted. The narrator of one of the sections is told by his mother about their servant that we have no need to raise our servant to our heads. She will take even more liberty with her behavior. It is best not to become informal with servants. One must always maintain some distance with them. So the narrator of this section has argued many times with his father over the equalities and inequalities in his family, because this narrator, he has come from America, and the equality, the concept of equality that he has experienced in America is far does not witness it in India. So in one of the other stories, the author he quotes that the main character, he believes that the servants set on your head if you indulge them by letting them watch television or allowing them anything they appear to enjoy. So the first section of this novel is a very fine example of how people feel psychologically separated and estranged from their native environment. It records the traumatic experiences of a person visiting his own country, India, after a long time with his son from America, and we witness that the man becomes an alien in his own country, an alien aggravated by the cultural otherness that strongly manifested in his son. The father fails to catch the boy's imagination while telling him the stories of historical figures in Fatehpur Sikri, and visiting in his native country with his son, who is too immature to comprehend the things that his father tries to make him understand. His father realizes the invisible cultural gap that exists between them. He is completely failed in understanding his son's nature, who has grown up in American lifestyle, away from the world of ghost stories and Ludo that pervaded the father's childhood in Calcutta. The entire section talks about his son's disconnection with his father's culture. The father tries his best to protect his son from the display of poverty, from the display of inequalities and the hardships that the lower section of people confront in India. So the individuals who migrate to a new place experience multiple stresses that affect their mental and physical health, including the loss of cultural values, their customs, their social environment, the loss of self, etc. They feel isolated and dislocated from their native culture. Millie, for example, who was just 9 years old from a village in Jharkhand, was forcibly sent by her mother to first work in distant village, then Jamshedpur, and then Bombay, so their financial situation of the home could be improved. It was done at a time when Millie had a very innate liking for studying, but at an early age, bearing the responsibilities of her family deprived her from having an even primary education. So nothing could be more heartbreaking than this very 9-year-old girl was sacrificing her dreams for just for her family. She had been pushed into the household works permanently by her family, and she even did not know when she will be able to go back to home. But after spending some years away from home, she thinks there is no home for her now. And Stuart Hall, in one of his essays, he writes that migration is one way trip and there is no home to go back to. So Mukherjee's novel, it exposes the uncertain situations of people who live on the periphery of a society. The writer portrays what happens to such a man who desperately wants to find an alternative in life. Salim Kalandar, there's another character who is professional beer wala, warns Lakshman that beer dancing has already been banned in cities by the government. Lakshman can't understand the logic behind banning the beer dancing. And the talking about the condition of female characters is even worse in such families, as the males, they are doubly marginalized in being the passive recipient of male torture. So this is all I have basically in this paper. I have tried to present how the lower people from lower sections of India, when they migrate to metropolitan cities, they are completely considered as other. They live on the periphery of a society. They are completely considered marginalized, and they are not made to mingle with the high society people. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sanyog. May I have one question regarding your paper?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, it's about the thing you have written on the title of your paper, that it is about periphery, struggle, and violence.
Yes,
So,
sir.
could you just give me one instance of violence being narrated in all these five stories? Any instance from the five
Yes, sir.
stories?
I have talked about violence, that when there is a violence even as a push factor. When there are some characters in, there are some Adivasi characters. When people from the, for example, Brahman classes, they come to Adivasis and they chop one of the hands of one character. So, being afraid of the violence, they decide to leave their village. So, there are several instances. Violence has been considered as a push factor.
Okay, so you mentioned all these instances in
Yes,
particular, or you talked about one or two or three instances only.
yes, sir.
Okay, so okay, thank you. It's very nice of you to present it
Thank you,
to
sir.
listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
So many, please welcome
Yes,
the
yes,
participants.
sir. Now I welcome Shweta Mo to present her paper.
Yeah, good afternoon to one and all. I, Shweta Moore, research scholar from Modi University, Rajasthan, is presenting my paper. The title of my paper is Toni Morrison Sula, a woman of new world. As we all know that Toni Morrison is a well-known African American novelist who was born on 18th of Feb in 1931 in OU. She has written extensively about racial and gender issues. She was the first African American author to be awarded the 1993 Nobel Prize in Literature. Through the figure of Sula as our protagonist of novel, this article attempts to illustrate Morrison's conception of a contemporary woman. Morrison's female heroine unquestionably possesses greater strength than their masculine equivalents. The status of black women in Toni Morrison's novel Sula, as well as female masculinity, are discussed in this research. In this story, women rebuild their lives by defying society expectations and conventions. They behave more like men than women when they are resisting. By rejecting the traditional gender roles, that women in the community perform, they try to develop their own selves and identities. The preconceptions of black women in African American fiction are challenged by Morrison females' characters. Patriarchy has historically organized and controls the lives of women by constructing ideals, roles, gender perceptions, and idealism that specify unfair means, techniques, and foundations to reach the so called wholeness for women. His narrative, not hers, is told in the history. Additionally, women who want to identify themselves against cultural expectations are labeled as reactionaries who aim to undermine society. Women's rebellion never goes unpunished, and Morrison presents its eloquent and as an isolated self. The outcome of black women in various matriarchal settings within black civilization are documented in this research. So, as we know that the protagonist of our book is Sula. She is a black woman who experiences racism from both white people and other black people. She disapproves of the conventional expectations placed on women in the society. And Morrison portrays this that that she rebelled against all the societal and constraint, losing her social liberation as a result. By revolting against her community, she hopes to impose her identity. Sula puts a lot of effort towards avoiding all the gender related traditionalism. In contrast to other oppressed black women in her community, Sula, according to Devika Rani, she challenges the social standards that deny a woman her own rights. She is shown as a highly courageous and brave woman who openly opposes the limitations placed on her uniqueness and destroys all ties to blood and other people in her quest to prove her lineage. Sula, in this novel, finds power in violating the accepted norms of her community, idols, and beliefs. Sula must be unique and unorthodox in order to perceive the various facets of the universe. She differs from other people in that she is authentic. She rejects acting in accordance with her community demands, with slavish obedience, no matter how others perceive her. She doesn't care. As she pleases, she utilizes men. She ignores them after having all the sexual activity with them and carries on with her daily activities. She disclaims the conventional rules that are put on black women. She is considered a devil by men who are terrified by her evil. People in the community of Sula band together to oppose her wicked deeds by rejecting her. She makes her community more cohesive by objectifying its threat. Despite the fact that they are well aware that evil is a nature component of human nature, individuals in her community do not rush to identify her as wicked. Sula's brutal treatment of her grandmother causes other women in her neighborhood to begin treating their kids differently, with love and compassion out of concern that they would receive the same treatment as Sula's grandmother. She believed that women would become like extinct living things if they did not rebel against injustice and oppression. Her family doesn't like her because she has unrestricted independence. She is the kind of woman who firmly asserts her place in her society and gets control over the freedom she has created. Women in her era endured a dreadful and harsh existence while awaiting their certain demise. She will not be able to breach the convention's wall without sufficient strength. She does not care about have material possessions or a high position in society. She merely wants to be a role model for other black women who are experiencing oppression so that they can fight and resist the dominance of oppressive male rule in society. So this is the gist of my paper where Sula fights for her own identity, for her freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Shwetaji. It was really very nice to listen to you, and I have seen that you have written on the topic. Particularly, this topic is let me check it out. It is Toni Morrison's Sola, a Woman of New World. So
Yes, sir.
yeah, so why do you choose to write on a new world? Do you think you are talking talking about? Are you talking about the position of or the challenges or the problems of a woman in new world, or the problem of a new woman in this particular world?
So, as I have saw this novel shows both the sides of the woman, as the women have gone through so much of discrimination, but in contrast to that, women have also bring their own identity from this novel.